Nonny, thank you again so much for taking the time to sit for this interview. I know that you're very, very busy and have a lot of really, really impressive projects on the pipeline. So,
No worries.
yeah, well, I'm not going to spend too much of this introductory time embarrassing you by telling you how you were my hero in journalism, but I do want to ask you about something where that is at least somewhat relevant, because you came into my life as a journalism student at Syracuse University when any story that I would do, whether it was radio or TV or a digital web story, I was always looking for emotional impact, whether it's a character in the story or a part of it that, really, really hits the audience hard personally. And when I was in Dan Pacheco's class and I saw your TED Talk, read one of the articles about the Godmother of VR, and actually got into the Vive to experience Kia and Project Syria. That was the kind of gut, like I saw the gut punch that I was looking for in journalism, the kind of visceral feeling of the emotions in a story by being present. So the one thing that I wanted to start by asking you is, I kind of want to know about sort of your early gut punch or sort of light bulb moment. When you were starting off as a journalist, do you remember what, like, some of the first things that really, really caught your imagination and kind of set you on this path? Because I know your work set me on the path from radio journalist to VR guy.
So I think, it's important to say, how did I become interested in VR myself, right? And actually, I'd read the Howard Rheingold book called Virtual Reality. And when I read that, that was the moment I thought, really, I can try to put people on scene in a story and in a way eliminate the barrier between the journalist and the audience and give people a more visceral sense of the view from the ground. And I think reading that book was kind of very formative moment for me of like really understanding how I could put people on scene. Now, I'd been a correspondent for Newsweek. I'd made a number of documentary films. I had worked, pretty long time with I even had one of the top 10 most emailed articles in the New York Times. I mean, like, by all means, a relatively successful journalism career. But I think when I realized that my goal had always been to give people a very intimate sense of the story, and that I could use these technologies to do it more effectively, or certainly in a more visceral, embodied way, then I really began to spend all my energy toward doing that.
Was there something practical or experiential that inspired you, or was it, sort of what you took out of the book that you then had to kind of endeavor to bring to life?
I definitely, with a lot of trial and error, but I was lucky enough to get into work. Sorry, I was lucky enough to get into the lab of Mel Slater and Maria Sanchez Vives in Barcelona. They learned about our piece that I made with digital artist Peggy Weil, where we made a virtual Guantanamo Bay prison, right? I'd done a documentary that had a big section on Gitmo and felt like it still wasn't getting enough attention. It's, habeas corpus violations and no trials and all that stuff that I still think is a real travesty. And they then invited us to their lab to build something about like using all the Freedom of Information Act material I had on detainees in a stress position. So we built a piece that put you in the body of a detainee in a stress position. And while I was building that piece, Mel put me into one of his experiences that he and Mavi had made looking at the bystander effect. And of course, you can't just put people on scene at a real event unfolding. So they made a piece where you walk into the bar and there's a guy who was in a drunk at the bar wearing one soccer team, football team shirt, and another guy walks in with an opposite one, and the drunk guy comes over and he's about ready to attack him. And I remember being like, oh my God, and pulling on the cable and trying to get closer, and really that visceral feeling that you're talking about, that was my first revelation that I didn't want my audience to be out there. I wanted them to be in here with me.
Even for somebody who, has an epithet, the Godmother of VR, somebody who's, considered a pioneer. You've mentioned in the past that there are a lot of difficulties that you face in, getting the attention that you need to work on the scale that you want to. How much of that do you think has to do with sexism or assumptions made about you because, you're a woman? Or if it's not overt, what kind of micro form does it take from your experience?
Well, you know, you have to just go and look at the numbers, right? When you look at the fact that despite the Me Too movement or a lot of the things that people say have been moving the needle forward for women to participate, venture money for women-run companies is still around the 2% level. So that means that 98% of funding goes to males and only about 2% goes to women. So there is definitely this whole implicit bias that goes on, and there have certainly been times where I have been very despondent and disheartened and frustrated, and especially because I had a number of male colleagues that I introduced to the medium go out and raise a lot of money. I've stuck with it, for better or for worse, and I'm starting to see some really interesting opportunities start to come up on the horizon. There's one other thing I have to say, which is a little bit disappointing, but it has been our reality. Whenever I've gone into a room to pitch an idea, whether it's content or whether it's, technology or et cetera, right? Because we made a very interesting fintech app for the Wall Street Journal, et cetera. I have found that if there's a woman decision maker, if the woman was the decision maker on these projects, when I walk in the room, I go, okay, I stand a chance. And if there wasn't a woman, I would think, well, my odds are smaller, much smaller. And that has certainly been the case.
Do you notice a difference in reception to your pitches or follow-up questions or just overall?
They just feel really normal. They just feel really normal. Like a normal conversation versus I just feel like I'm having a normal conversation like I would with anybody versus these other conversations which feel a little bit more like there's a wall there that I have to scale. And sometimes it's fine. But I've definitely done this in spite of versus, it hasn't really mattered how good my team has been, the incredible track record we have consistently innovating and staying ahead of things. That has been not all that well recognized publicly, hasn't been so recognized in terms of investment. But again, I guess the good news is I own more of my company, and hopefully that will be a valuable thing for me later on in the future.
I guess this is kind of the obligatory dream project question, and I'm sure a lot of the stuff that you've done with Emblematic is already reflective of stuff that you were dying to tell and get out there. But is there anything either coming up down the pipeline or just something that you're kind of envisioning that you're really, really excited about?
Well, we just got yesterday, I can't publicly talk about it yet, but we just got a really nice chunk of money to do a project that, gosh, it's kind of boring, right? Because I can't talk about it, but for 5 years I've been pitching it and finally got the funding. So that tells you another thing, like about, this kind of resilience you have to have. And that was true for documentary film too. I had one project that I pitched for 10 years, out of the door, in the door, out of the door, in the door, before I finally got to make it. So, sorry, you remind me about one of those projects that we should go back and look at it. But there are a number of stories, that I've kept in my back pocket that I'm hoping that we'll be able to, come back out. And then of course, I'd love to have a more solid team of reporters working for me. To use REACH, that would be great. If I get I'm in some discussions now, finally, I think, for investment in REACH. I had my first really positive conversations in the last few weeks. And hopefully that will allow me to bring at least one or two journalists who just use the platform, really use it for journalism, would be so great.
Where do you get the resilience and the strength to push yourself through no matter how many times you hit a wall or even when things are at their most frustrating?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, right? You kind of course, look back on your parents and have to be grateful for your parents. And my mom, I think sometimes my, wanting to do stories that really convey human rights issues or We've talked about empathy of putting people on scene so they connect with other people, right, which is so crucial. Um, my mom suffered a lot of discrimination growing up in Texas. She and her friends would go to a coffee shop, and um, you know, they would never take their order. We're ready to order now. Oh, we'll be right back. Ready to order now. Okay, we'll be there soon. Never would serve them. So that kind of like sense of I can't help her, but I can maybe help other people, I think is one kind of core driver. Because my mom, people will tell you my mom's the sweetest, nicest person, kindest, beloved person in the community. Then my father, who is an artist, has always got a rebellious streak that I think that gives you stubbornness. And that I tell the story of being in junior high school and the math teacher sending home a note saying, Nonny did this, the other in class today. And he flipped it over and wrote back, she tells me you did this, that, and the other, and sent me back to school with it. So if you think like, well, okay, that person could be wrong, that authority figure could be wrong, it does give you that sense of like, well, I could be right. And maybe I am right. And that sort of stubbornness that in the face of being told no, why I don't take no for an answer, and why I don't get me wrong, there have been many days where I have felt very, very blue and very low, but you shake yourself off. Another day goes by, you try to forget what happened and keep going.
Is there anything in particular that you can point to that helps you shake that stuff off? Because I think this is a time in a lot of people's lives where people are, looking around for coping tools.
Yeah, that is a really tough one. And I would say, embrace as much love as you can around you, right? I know there was a time in when I first made Hunger, I don't know if you know how bad it got. I was making Hunger in LA, and I actually lost my position as a research fellow at USC after the director of the journalism school left, and the dean didn't really think what I had to offer, I was trying to do, was of value. And I lost my position there. And my husband was teaching as a professor, so it wasn't like we weren't going to get a salary in the month, but I wasn't making anything. We had the two kids, and we were credit cards maxed out, and I had cooked dinner for my kids. And then a friend of mine asked me if I could please grab her kids because she was a doctor, and a patient was there late. And I did. And when she got to my house, I said, hey, do you mind watching my kids while I go for a quick run? And when I came back, she'd fed my last spaghetti and meatballs to my, or whatever it was, to her kids. We were those kind of friends, right? And then but it wasn't until she left that I realized, and I had no food. And we had $2.99 in the bank. And there was nothing left for me to eat in the refrigerator. And I didn't have enough money to scrape together all the pennies and quarters had already been spent. And my husband was getting paid the next day, but there was nothing that day. There was just nothing. There was no money. There was nothing. And believe it or not, our piano teacher came over, who didn't get paid for a year, and bought my dinner. And he came over, and I just was crying. And my husband came home, and I was like, I can't keep doing this. I have to go back to a regular job. I just can't keep doing this. And my husband was the one who's like, hold the course. It's going to be okay. Stay there. Stay in. So I know what people are going through when it feels like you can't make it through. I know it feels that way, but you will. We will get through this. We will get through this. And what you might learn from this period that you can bring into your future might be the thing that changes your future. And I'm not saying that these aren't terrible times and these aren't terrible things. They are. And they're so difficult. It was so difficult. And, it definitely had a huge impact. I didn't have a job for years, and, we took us a long time to recover. But we have, and we did, and you will. And
do you remember a particular moment when things were turning around where you stopped and, actually registered or felt for the moment like, okay, things are better now. We've I can see the momentum.
Well, I have to say the opening night at Sundance in January of 2012 was, if you can imagine, a huge moment for me, in that, like, it worked. right? This crazy idea that I'd lost my job over essentially was having this profound impact on people, and that that I was making the hungry visible, and that I was also creating a powerful new storytelling avenue. And the lines at Sundance were like 5 and 6 hours long, and people were coming out weeping and crying and just so deeply affected, and telling me I'm going to go donate to my food bank, I'm going to go help. And I just, that was a moment for me of, okay, I am on the right path, and this is what I need to keep doing. And, Andrew, what can I say? Like, even the term immersive journalism is used by major news orgs now, and I made the term up. What a crazy idea, right?
Yeah, it's
Crazy idea to have this concept, come up with a term for it, and have it become part of the canon. Wow.
it's I'm sure you wouldn't let a thing like that go to your head or anything, but it's, people don't exaggerate, like whether you buy into the Godmother of VR epithet or not, you are like, one of the pioneers. You are kind of one of the interesting things for me, as a student of VR is to kind of watch the seed that you planted start to sprout and, grow and begin to bear fruit.
It's very exciting that people find it an engaging medium to work. And I have to say, I feel like we're getting to have, I'm hoping that the WebXR platform will really, really plant more seeds and diversify those seeds and make it, a tool that's, not just, that's not limited to Silicon Valley, but really, make it available to everybody. So that's super cool. And yeah, the Godmother thing I always find a little awkward, but thank you for calling me a pioneer. I'll embrace that one.
In a personal narrative like yours, which is full of you against the world, basically, it's really heartwarming to hear that there are people who believe in what you're doing and people who are, determined to help you move forward. So, Nonny, thank you very, very much for taking the
Thank
time to
you.
talk today. This is obviously a huge honor for me. I love your work, and I could go on about that for a very long time, but I respect your schedule.
Of course, of course.